3 years ago, my ex-fiance Thorne Blackwood stood in his penthouse, threw my engagement ring across the room, and told me I'd come crawling back when I realized I was nothing without him. Last week, I watched him walk into my company for his first day as my new employee. The look on his face when he realized I was the CEO? Absolutely priceless. I still remember that day like it was yesterday. The way my hands trembled as I packed my things while Thorne stood there, arms crossed, watching me with that smug look on his face. The diamond ring that had once symbolized our future lay abandoned on the Italian marble floor, just like my dreams. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life, Zara," he said, his voice eerily calm as he sipped his bourbon. Nobody walks away from a black way. I zipped my suitcase shut and looked him straight in the eyes. "Watch me." But let me back up and tell you how I ended up engaged to one of Boston's most eligible bachelors in the first place. I met Thorne at a tech conference 4 years ago. I was presenting a panel on emerging software development trends, nothing groundbreaking, but I was proud to be there. I was working as a mid-level developer at Launchpoint Technologies, making decent money, but nothing compared to what Thorne had. After my panel, this tall, impeccably dressed man approached me with questions that were actually intelligent, not the usual mansplaining I was used to at these events. That man was Thorne Blackwood, heir to Blackwood Ventures, a third-generation venture capital firm that had funded half the tech startups in New England. "Your insights on predictive algorithm development were fascinating," he said, handing me his business card. "Would you be interested in continuing this conversation over dinner?" I nearly laughed. Men like Thorne Blackwood didn't date women like me, women who grew up in three-bedroom houses in the suburbs with parents who worked overtime to put them through state college. But apparently he did. Our first date was at Maison Bluey, the kind of restaurant where they don't put prices on the menu. I wore my only designer dress, a discount rack find I'd been saving for special occasions. "You look beautiful," he said when I arrived, and for once, I actually felt it. Thorne was charming, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in my work. By dessert, I was smitten. He paid the bill without looking at it and asked to see me again the following weekend. That's how it started. Weekend dates turned into weeknight dinners, which turned into me practically living at his penthouse overlooking the Charles River. 6 months in, I was introduced to his mother, Imogen Frost Blackwood. "So you work in computers?" she asked during our first meeting, her voice dripping with the kind of polite disdain only old money can perfect. "I'm a software developer," I corrected her, smiling through clenched teeth. "How industrious," she replied, sipping her tea. "Thorne's last girlfriend was a curator at the MFA. It's nice he's expanding his horizons." I glanced at Thorne, expecting him to defend me, but he just chuckled and changed the subject. I should have seen it then, the red flag waving frantically in my face, but I was too blinded by what I thought was love. A year into our relationship, Thorne proposed during a surprise trip to Santorini. The ring was flawless, a 5-carat emerald-cut diamond that felt heavy on my finger in more ways than one. "With this ring, you'll never have to worry about anything again," he whispered as he slid it onto my finger. At the time, I thought it was romantic. Looking back, I realized he was already trying to mold me into someone who depended on him completely. My sister Veda saw through him from the beginning. The night after we announced our engagement, she came over to my apartment while Thorne was at a business dinner. "Are you sure about this, Z?" she asked, studying the massive rock on my finger. "I mean, he's charming and all, but sometimes when he looks at you, it's like he's admiring a new acquisition, not the woman he loves." I defended him, of course. "You don't understand him like I do. He's under a lot of pressure from his family." Veta tucked her lavender-streaked hair behind her ear, a nervous habit since childhood. "I'm just saying, you've been coding less, talking about your app ideas less. The Zara I know wouldn't put her dreams on the back burner for any man, not even one with a black card." I brushed her concerns aside, but deep down, I knew she was right. I had been working on an app idea, a platform that would revolutionize how small businesses manage their supply chains, but whenever I mentioned it to Thorne, he'd smile indulgently and say, "That's cute, babe, but why stress yourself out? You don't need to work once we're married." Meanwhile, wedding planning took over my life. Imogen insisted on being involved in every detail, from the venue, the plaza obviously, to the guest list, 500. People, most of whom I'd never met, to my dress, a custom Vera Wang that cost more than my annual salary. The Blackwood wedding will be the event of the season, she declared during one of our planning lunches. You'll need to take etiquette classes, of course. And perhaps we should consider some minor adjustments to your appearance before the big day? Nothing dramatic, just a touch of refinement. I looked at Thorne again, hoping he'd intervene, but he was scrolling through emails on his phone. When he finally looked up, he simply said, "Mother knows best, darling." That evening, my best friend Dom called to check in. He was the marketing director at a competing tech firm and one of the few people who encouraged my app idea. "How's life in the Golden Tower?" he joked, but his voice held genuine concern. "It's overwhelming," I admitted, stepping onto Thorne's balcony so I wouldn't be overheard. "Sometimes I feel like I'm being molded into someone I don't recognize." "Then stop letting them mold you," Dom replied simply. "The Tsar I know has never been afraid to code her own path." I laughed at his terrible pun, but his words stayed with me. The next morning, I woke up with renewed determination. While Thorne was at his boxing class, I pulled out my laptop and spent hours refining my business plan. When he returned, I was so engrossed I didn't hear him come in. "Working on the weekend?" "That's dedication," he remarked, peering over my shoulder. "What's this?" "Your app thing again." "Yes, actually, I've been thinking about pitching it to some investors." Thorne's smile tightened. "Investors?" "Investors?" "Babe, if you were serious about this, you could have just asked me to look at it." "I am serious about it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And I'd rather get unbiased feedback first." He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Unbiased? Zara, nobody's going to be honest with you like I will. That's what partners are for." I closed my laptop. "So be honest. What do you think of my idea?" Thorne sighed, as if I was a child asking for one more bedtime story. "I think it's adorable that you want to play entrepreneur, but let's be realistic. You're about to become Mrs. Blackwood. You'll be on the board of my mother's foundation, hosting dinner parties, maybe doing some charity work. That's a full-time job in itself." "What if I want more than that?" I challenged. His eyes narrowed slightly. "More than being a Blackwood? There is no more than that in Boston." That night at dinner with his business associates, Thorne introduced me as his fiancée, the future Mrs. Blackwood, formerly in tech, as if my career was already in the past tense. One of the men at the table, a silver-haired venture capitalist named Lachlan Reeves, turned to me with genuine interest. "What area of tech were you in?" Before I could answer, Thorne jumped in. "Zara was a developer at Launchpoint, but she's transitioning to more important roles now. Speaking of transitions, how's the Anderson merger coming along?" The conversation shifted, and I sat there with a polite smile plastered on my face, feeling invisible despite the massive diamond weighing down my left hand. Later that week, I received an email from Vertex Capital. They were interested in hearing my pitch. The meeting was scheduled for the same day as Imogen's annual charity gala, an event she'd been planning for months. "You can't miss the gala," Thorne said when I told him about the scheduling conflict. "Mother has already told everyone you'll be there. The Hoffmans are coming specifically to meet you." "This meeting is important to me," I insisted. "I can make it to the gala right after. I'll only be an hour late tops." "An hour late? To my mother's event?" Thorne's voice rose. "Do you have any idea how that would look?" "Like I have a career and ambitions of my own?" I suggested. That's when a fight really started. Words were exchanged, old frustrations surfaced, and suddenly we were arguing about things far deeper than a missed gala. "You've been different lately," Thorne accused. "Distant. Distracted. Maybe because I feel like I'm disappearing into your world," I shot back. "Like my dreams don't matter anymore." "Your dreams?" he scoffed. "You mean this little app fantasy?" "Wake up, Zara. For every successful startup, there are thousands that fail. Why risk it when you have everything you could want right here?" "Because it's mine," I said quietly. "Because I need something that's just mine." Thorne stared at me, realization dawning on his perfect features. "You don't really want this, do you? Any of it?" "The wedding, the life we've planned." I hesitated, and that was answer enough for him. That's when it happened, when he grabbed my laptop, scrolled through my business plan with a mocking laugh, and the whole thing imploded. His mother arrived unannounced, adding fuel to the fire with her disappointed sighs and pointed comments about my unsuitability. And then Thorn delivered the ultimatum that would change everything. Choose Zara, your little pipe dream, or our future. When I didn't immediately abandon my ambitions, he yanked the ring off my finger and threw it across the room, where it bounced off the wall and skittered under the sofa. You'll be back, he said coldly. When you realize you're nothing without the Blackwood name and the doors it opens for you, you'll come crawling back. And I won't be nearly as generous then. 3 years later, I stood in my corner office watching through the glass wall as Thorne Blackwood sat nervously in our reception area, waiting for his job interview at Kingsley Tech Solutions, my company, now valued at $40 million after our latest funding round. Life has a funny way of coming full circle. But that moment of satisfaction was 3 years in the making, and the journey wasn't easy. Not by a long shot. The night I left Thorne's penthouse, I drove straight to Veda's apartment, mascara streaking down my face, my hands still shaking on the steering wheel. I didn't call ahead. I didn't need to. That's the thing about sisters. They're there for the crashes as much as the celebrations. When Veda opened her door and saw me standing there with my hastily packed suitcase and puffy eyes, she didn't say, "I told you so." She just pulled me into a hug. "It's over," I whispered into her shoulder. "Then it's his loss," she replied, pulling me inside. "And maybe you're Dane." I crashed on her pull-out couch that night, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars she'd stuck to her ceiling years ago when we first moved to Boston. By morning, my sadness had crystallized into something harder, sharper determination. "I'm going to that investor meeting," I announced over the coffee Veda had made, "and I'm going to nail it." Veda raised her eyebrows, impressed. "That's the Zara I know. But first we need to get your stuff from his place." I shook my head. "I don't want anything from that life." "Not even your clothes?" "Your tech. You signed first edition Asimov collection?" She had a point. My entire professional wardrobe was in Thorne's closet, not to mention my backup drives and the books I'd collected since college. But the thought of facing him again made my stomach knot. "I'll go with you," Veda offered. "We'll go when he's at work, pack your stuff, and be out before he knows it. Plus, I've always wanted to raid a rich jerk's fridge." That made me smile for the first time in what felt like forever. We arrived at Thorne's building at 10 a.m. sharp, when I knew he'd be deep in meetings at Blackwood Ventures. The doorman's eyes widened when he saw me. "Miss Kingsley," he says, clearly uncomfortable. "Mr. Blackwood mentioned you might be stopping by for your things." Of course he did. Thorne always liked to be one step ahead. "That's right, Fletcher," I replied, trying to sound confident. "My sister's helping me move." Fletcher nodded, relief washing over his face now that he didn't have to deny me entry. "Take all the time you need." The penthouse felt different in daylight, colder, more like a showroom than a home. Had it always been this sterile, or was I just seeing it clearly for the first time? "Wow," Veda whistled, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows and designer furniture. "It's like a museum where you're not allowed to touch anything." That's basically what living with Thorne was like, I admitted, heading for the bedroom. We worked efficiently, packing my clothes, take, and books. I was just taping up the last box when the front door opened. My heart dropped to my stomach. Thorne wasn't supposed to be home for hours. He stood in the doorway of the bedroom, his tailored suit as impeccable as always, his expression unreadable. "I see you've come to your senses," he said, his tone casual, as if we'd had a minor disagreement rather than ended our engagement. "I'm just getting my things," I replied, willing my voice not to shake. Thorne's gaze traveled to Veda, who was glaring at him with undisguised contempt, then back to me. "When you're done playing independent woman, the ring will be in the safe," he said with a dismissive wave. "Mother's disappointed, of course, but she understands youthful rebellion." Veda stepped forward. "Youthful rebellion? Is that what you call not wanting to be your trophy wife?" "Veda," I warned. The last thing I needed was a scene. Thorne smiled, the kind that never reached his eyes. "Listen to your sister, Verity. This doesn't concern you." "It's Veda, you condescending prick," my sister snapped. "And considering I'm the one who's going to help pick up the pieces after what you did, it absolutely concerns me." I grabbed Veda's arm. Let's just go. Please. But Thorne wasn't done. He leaned against the doorframe, blocking our exit. You know, Zara, it's not too late. We can tell everyone you had cold feet, took some time to think. No one needs to know about your professional aspirations. The way he said it, like my career was a hobby, a phase to be outgrown, rekindled the anger that had been smoldering since our fight. Move, Thorne. The Hoffmans were quite disappointed you missed the gala, he continued, ignoring my request. Richard was going to introduce you to his nephew, who runs that little coding club you were interested in. See? I do listen. Coding club, I repeated, incredulous. You mean the Women in Tech mentorship program I wanted to join? The one you said was beneath my news station? Thorne shrugged. Semantics. The point is, I was trying to support your interests in a way that fits our lifestyle. Our lifestyle. As if there was still an hour. I don't need you to make my career palatable for your world, Thorne. I needed a partner who values my ambitions as much as his own. Something flashed in his eyes. Hurt, maybe, or just wounded pride. Then it was gone, replaced by that cool Blackwood reserve. Fine. Take your things and go. But remember what I said last night. When your little startup fantasy crashes and burns, and statistically speaking, don't expect a warm welcome back. I lifted my chin. I'd rather fail on my own terms than succeed on yours. He moved aside finally, and Veda and I carried the boxes to the elevator. As the doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of Thorne, standing alone in the hallway of his perfect penthouse, looking suddenly smaller than I remembered. Back at Veda's apartment, we ordered takeout and I tried to focus on preparing for my meeting with Vertex Capital. But doubt kept creeping in, Thorne's words echoing in my mind, when your little startup fantasy crashes and burns. What if he was right? What if I was throwing away security and status for a pipe dream? Stop it, Veda said, catching my expression. You're doing that thing where you hear his voice in your head. I managed a weak smile. That obvious, huh? You get this crease between your eyebrows, she said, poking my forehead gently. Look, Z, you're brilliant. Your app idea is brilliant, and even if it doesn't work out, which you will, trying and failing is better than wondering what if for the rest of your life while you host garden parties for people you hate. My phone buzzed with a text from Dom, heard about the breakup. You okay? I hesitated, then replied, getting there. Moving forward with the pitch. His response was immediate. That's my girl. Need help prepping? That night, Dom came over with his laptop and a bottle of wine. We stayed up until 2 a.m. refining my pitch deck, his marketing expertise complementing my technical knowledge in ways that made the presentation stronger than I could have made it alone. You know, Dom said as we wrapped up, I've been thinking about making a career change myself. If this goes well and you need a marketing guy, I looked up, surprised. Are you serious? You love your job at NextGen. Dom shrugged. I love the work, not the company. My boss takes credit for my campaigns, the culture is toxic, and frankly, I'd rather build something meaningful with someone I trust. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, I laughed. I haven't even pitched yet. Just saying, he grinned. I believe in you, Zara Kingsley. Always have. The next morning, I dressed in one of the few professional outfits I'd managed to grab from Thorne's, a navy blue dress that I'd bought with my own money before we met. It felt symbolic somehow. As I was about to leave for the meeting, my phone rang with Imogen's number. Aren't you going to answer that? Veda asked, watching me stare at the screen. I declined the call. Whatever she has to say, I don't need to hear it today. The Vertex Capital offices were housed in a sleek glass building downtown. As I checked in with reception, I felt my phone buzz again. Thorne this time. I silenced it and put it away. Miss Kingsley? A young assistant appeared. They're ready for you now. I took a deep breath and followed her into the boardroom where 3 investors waited. I recognized one of them immediately, Lachlan Reeves, the silver-haired venture capitalist from Thorne's dinner party who'd actually shown interest in my career. He recognized me too, his eyebrows lifting slightly in surprise. Miss Kingsley, he said, standing to shake my hand. What a pleasant coincidence. I believe we met at the Blackwood dinner last month. Yes, we did, I confirmed, wondering if this would help or hurt my chances. Well, I'm intrigued to see what brings you to us today, Lachlan said, gesturing for me to begin. I connected my laptop to their projector and launched into my pitch. For the next 20 minutes, I outlined my vision for SupplyLink, an app that would streamline supply chain management for small to medium businesses, allowing them to compete with larger corporations without the overhead costs. As I spoke, I felt the familiar rush of passion that came whenever I discussed this project, the one Thorne had dismissed as a cute little hobby. Here, in this room of serious investors, there was nothing cute or little about it. It was a viable business proposition with market potential. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Then Lachlan leaned forward. That was impressive, Miss Kingsley. You've clearly identified a gap in the market. My only concern is scalability. How do you plan to grow beyond the initial user base? I answered confidently, having anticipated this question during my prep with Dom. The other investors joined in, their questions challenging but fair. I held my ground, defending my vision while acknowledging areas that needed refinement. After what felt like hours but was probably only 45 minutes, Lachlan sat back. Thank you, Miss Kingsley. We'd like to discuss internally and get back to you next. If that's acceptable? Of course, I replied, trying not to let my disappointment show. I'd been hoping for an answer today. As the meeting wrapped up and I gathered my materials, my phone buzzed yet again. This time it was a text from Thorne. Mother is quite upset. Call her. I was so distracted by the message that I almost bumped into Lachlan in the hallway. Sorry, I mumbled, quickly putting my phone away. No harm done, he said with a smile. Off the record, Miss Kingsley, that was one of the more promising pitches we've seen this quarter. But I'm curious. I was under the impression you were engaged to Thorne Blackwood? My heart sank. Of course that would come up. We recently ended our engagement, I admitted. Creative differences, you might say. Lachlan nodded thoughtfully. I see. Well, in my experience, the most successful entrepreneurs are those who stay true to their vision despite outside pressure. We'll be in touch. As I left the building, my phone rang again. Thorne. This time I answered. What, Thorne? I'm busy. Busy failing from what I hear, he replied, his tone smug. Just had lunch with Jackson from Vertex. He said your pitch was ambitious but unfocused. My stomach dropped. Jackson had been one of the investors in my meeting, the one who'd asked the toughest questions. How did you, I began. Boston's a small town, Zara, especially in venture capital. Did you really think you could pitch to my colleagues without me finding out? I stopped walking, anger building in my chest. Are you having me followed? Don't be dramatic, he scoffed. Jackson and I play squash every Thursday. Your name came up. And I'm sure you had nothing but glowing things to say, I said bitterly. There was a pause, then I didn't have to say anything. Your pitch spoke for itself. My pitch was solid, and you know it, I snapped, drawing looks from passers-by. Was it? Because that's not what Jackson said. Look, it's not too late, Zara. Come home, apologize to Mother, and we can put this whole episode behind us. I'll even talk to Frederick at Blackwood Media about creating a position for you, something that will let you use your technical skills without all this startup stress. The condescension in his voice was the final straw. I'd rather work at a fast food drive-thru than be your corporate charity case, Thorne. Don't call me again. I hung up, hands shaking with rage. How dare he try to sabotage my pitch and then offer me a consolation job? The audacity was so typically Thorne it made my blood boil. By the time I reached Veda's apartment, I was in full crisis mode. They're not going to fund me, I announced as soon as I walked in. Thorne knows one of the investors, and he's already poisoned the well. Veda looked up from her laptop, alarmed. What? How do you know? Jason explained my conversation with Thorne, pacing the small living room. That manipulative, controlling, silver spoon-fed, Veda began. Not helping, I interrupted, dropping onto the couch. What am I going to do? Even if I pitch to other firms, Thorne has connections everywhere. He's going to block me at every turn. My phone buzzed with a text from Dom. How'd it go? I didn't have the heart to reply. Maybe this is a sign, I said quietly. Maybe I should take the L, Go back to a regular dev job, build up some savings before trying again. Veda sat next to me, or maybe it's a sign that you need to fight harder. Thorne thinks he owns this town? Prove him wrong. My phone rang again, an unknown number this time. I almost ignored it, but answered at the last second. Zara Kingsley speaking. Miss Kingsley, this is Lachlan Reeves from Vertex Capital. I sat up straight, motioning frantically for Veda to be quiet. Mr. Reeves, thank you for calling. I'll cut to the chase. Your pitch today was excellent, despite what some of my colleagues might have said to certain interested parties. My breath caught. Did he know about Thorne's interference? The thing is, Miss Kingsley, I've been in this business for 30 years. I've learned to recognize not just good ideas, but good founders. People with the resilience and vision to turn setbacks into stepping stones. I appreciate that, sir, I said, not daring to hope. Vertex won't be moving forward with your project. My heart sank. However, Lachlan continued, I have a proposal for you. I've recently established a personal angel investment fund separate from Vertex. I'd like to offer you initial funding of $250,000 for a 15% stake in your company. I nearly dropped the phone. Are you serious? Entirely. With one condition, you bring on a co-founder with marketing experience, someone who complements your technical expertise and can help you scale. Dom's face immediately flashed in my mind. I know just the person, I said, a smile spreading across my face despite myself. Excellent. Have your lawyer contact mine to draw up the paperwork. And Miss Kingsley? Perhaps we should. Keep this between us for now. Boston's a small town after all. As I hung up, Veda was practically bouncing with curiosity. Well, what happened? Lachlan Reeves just offered to personally fund SupplyLink, I said, still in disbelief. And I think he did it specifically to circumvent Thorne's influence. Veda squealed and hugged me. That's amazing. See? For every door Thorne closes, another one opens. As her words sank in, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just about proving Thorne wrong anymore. This was about proving myself right. About building something that was entirely mine, something no one could take away or dismiss as a cute hobby. I picked up my phone to text Dom, we need to talk. How do you feel about co-founding a company? His reply was instantaneous. Tell me when and where. I'm in. That night, as we celebrated with cheap champagne in Veda's tiny kitchen, I made a silent promise to myself. Someday, Thorne Blackwood would regret underestimating me. Someday, he'd see exactly what I was capable of building without him. Little did I know just how literally that promise would come true. The morning after Lachlan's call, Dom and I met at a small coffee shop far from the financial district, somewhere we wouldn't run into anyone from Thorne's circle. As I pushed through the door, I spotted Dom already seated in the corner booth, 2 coffees waiting on the table. You're early, I said, sliding in across from him. Couldn't sleep, he admitted, pushing a latte toward me. Kind of a big day when your best friend asks you to quit your job and jump into the startup abyss with her. I winced. When you put it that way, it sounds insane. Oh, it is absolutely insane, Dom agreed, his expression serious before breaking into a grin. And I'm 100% in. I felt a wave of relief. Despite his text message, part of me had worried he'd change his mind overnight. You haven't even heard the details yet, I reminded him. Dom leaned back, hands behind his head. Details, schmetales. You're the most brilliant person I know, Zara. If you believe in this app, that's good enough for me. Well, here are the details anyway, I said, pulling out my laptop. Lachlan's offering $250,000 for 15%. That gives us enough runway for about 18 months if we're careful. We'll need office space, something small to start, and we'll need to hire at least one more developer. As I talked, Dom took notes on his phone, occasionally interrupting with questions or suggestions. By the time we finished our coffees, we had the skeleton of a business plan. So, Dom said, what's our first move? First, you need to give notice at NextGen. His smile faltered slightly. Right. That part. Having second thoughts, I asked, suddenly anxious. Dom shook his head firmly. Not about joining you, just about telling Carson. He's going to lose it when I quit in the middle of the Helix campaign. You could wait until after— No way, Dom cut me off. I'm not delaying this. Carson will survive. Besides, he added with a mischievous glint in his eye, I've already drafted my resignation email. Want to see? He turned his phone toward me, showing me the email he'd composed. It was professional but unapologetic, making it clear he was leaving to pursue an opportunity he couldn't pass up. Send it, I urged. Dom hesitated only a moment before hitting send. Done. No turning back now. We spent the rest of the day in that coffee shop, refining our vision for SupplyLink, drafting job descriptions, and researching affordable office spaces. As the afternoon wore on, Dom's phone buzzed repeatedly with increasingly frantic messages from his boss, all of which he ignored with gleeful abandon. Freedom feels good, he declared as we finally packed up. Terrifying, but good. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Lachlan's investment came through, we secured a tiny office in a converted warehouse in Somerville, and we hired Ridley, a brilliant developer who'd recently graduated from MIT. The three of us worked around the clock, fueled by takeout and determination, building the first version of SupplyLink. 6 weeks in, we were ready for beta testing. I reached out to some small businesses I'd connected with during my research phase, and 5 agreed to try our platform. The feedback was cautiously positive, with plenty of suggestions for improvement, which we implemented immediately. Everything was going according to plan until one evening when I was working late at the office. Dom and Ridley had already left for the night, and I was fixing a bug in the inventory tracking module when the door opened. I looked up, expecting the cleaning crew, only to find myself staring at Thorne. My stomach dropped. He looked immaculate as always in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than our monthly rent, his expression unreadable as he surveyed our modest office. So this is where you've been hiding, he said, stepping further into the room. I had to bribe your sister's roommate to get the address. I stood up, instinctively putting the desk between us. How did you get in here? The building's security is laughably inadequate, Thorne replied, running a finger along a shelf and examining the dust with distaste. You should consider upgrading, though I suppose budget constraints are an issue. What do you want, Thorne? I asked, crossing my arms. He sighed as if the answer should be obvious. I want to talk sense into you. It's been 2 months, Sarah. Isn't this little rebellion getting tiresome? Rebellion, I echoed. This isn't some tantrum, Thorne. This is my company. Your company, he repeated, making air quotes with his fingers. In a building with no security, and an office with secondhand furniture running on what? Reese's pocket change? I felt my cheeks flush with anger. We have 5 clients already. Test users, he corrected. There's a difference. What do you care anyway? I demanded. You made it pretty clear what you thought of my little hobby project. When you threw my ring across the room, something flickered across Thorne's face. Regret, maybe, or just calculation. He stepped closer. I lost my temper that night, he admitted. Perhaps I was harsh. Harsh, I repeated incredulously. You belittled my dreams, dismissed my ambitions, and tried to sabotage my pitch to Vertex. Harsh doesn't begin to cover it. I was trying to protect you, Thorne insisted. The startup world is brutal, Zara. 9 out of 10 fail within the first year. I didn't want to see you get hurt. I stared at him, suddenly seeing clearly what I'd been blind to during our relationship. No, Thorne. You didn't want to see me succeed without you. There's a difference. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. For a moment, his composed facade cracked, revealing something raw underneath. Then it was gone, replaced by the cool, controlled Thorne Blackwood I knew so well. Fine. Have it your way, he said, his tone clipped. But when this little venture inevitably crashes and burns, don't say I didn't warn you. He turned to leave but paused at the door. By the way, I ran into Jackson from Vertex at the club yesterday. He mentioned Reeves has gone rogue with his investments lately. Said he's backing passion projects over sound business opportunities. Food for thought. With that parting shot, He was gone, leaving behind only the lingering scent of his expensive cologne and a cloud of doubt. I sank back into my chair, my hands shaking with a mixture of anger and unwanted uncertainty. Was Thorne right? Was Lachlan just taking a flyer on us, not really expecting us to succeed? Were we doomed to be another startup statistic? I was still sitting there, spiraling, when my phone buzzed with a text from Dom, just landed a meeting with Bright. Owner saw our demo at the Small Biz Expo and wants to talk integration for their 12 locations. Brewrite was a growing chain of craft breweries that had expanded rapidly across New England in the past year. They were exactly the type of client we were hoping to attract, established enough to have real supply chain challenges, but not so large that they'd already invested in custom solutions. I stared at the message, a slow smile spreading across my face. Then I took a screenshot and sent it to Veda with the caption, "Looks like my little hobby project just got its first major client." Her response was immediate, YESSSS. Take that, Thorne Blackwood. Middle finger, I laughed out loud, the doubt Thorne had planted beginning to dissolve. This was real. We were doing this. And no one, especially not my ex-fiancé, was going to stand in our way. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting with Dom and Ridley. We need to level up, I announced as soon as they arrived. Brewrite is interested, and they could be just the beginning if we play this right. But our current platform won't handle their scale. What are you suggesting? Ridley asked, already pulling out his laptop. We need to rebuild the back end, I said. Make it more robust, more scalable, and we need to do it fast. Dom whistled low. That's a tall order, Z. We're talking weeks of work, minimum. Then we better get started, I replied, my tone leaving no room for debate. I'll code through the weekend if that's what it takes. And that's exactly what we did. For the next 3 weeks, our tiny office became our second home. We ordered in meals, sometimes slept on the old couch we'd found on Craigslist, and coded until our eyes burned. Ridley brought in a friend to help Neil, a UX designer who revamped our interface while we rebuilt the back end. The night before our meeting with Brewrite, none of us went home. We were still finding bugs, fixing glitches, and polishing the demo at 5 a.m. It's not perfect, Ridley mumbled, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. It doesn't need to be perfect, Dom replied, his normally perfect hair sticking up in all directions. It just needs to work. And look impressive enough to secure the deal, Mila added, making one final adjustment to the color scheme. I looked around at my team bleary-eyed, exhausted, but still pushing forward. This was what Thorne could never understand. This wasn't about money or status or proving a point. This was about building something that mattered, with people who believed in it as much as I did. It's going to work, I said with conviction. We're going to make it work. The meeting with Brewrite was scheduled for 10 a.m. at their headquarters in Cambridge. Dom and I arrived early, fueled by espresso and determination, our presentation loaded on my laptop and backed up on a flash drive, just in case. Ready for this? Dom asked as we waited in the lobby. I nodded, too nervous to speak. This wasn't just a potential client. This was validation. Proof that Thorne was wrong about me, about SupplyLink, about everything. The meeting started rough. The COO, a gruff man named Harlan, seemed skeptical from the outset. We've seen a dozen inventory systems, he said, cutting short our introduction. What makes yours different? Dom jumped in smoothly. Rather than tell you, why don't we show you? Zara, would you mind running the demo using Brewrite's actual inventory data? This was a gamble we'd prepared for. Using publicly available information and some educated guesses, we built a simulation of Brewrite's supply chain. If our assumptions were wrong, we'd look foolish. If they were right, I launched the demo, walking them through how SupplyLink would track their ingredients from multiple suppliers, predict shortages based on sales data, and automatically adjust orders to prevent overstock or stockouts. As I talked, I saw Harlan's expression shift from skepticism to interest. When I showed how our system had predicted a potential hop shortage based on weather patterns in their supplier regions, a real issue brewing companies were facing that season, he actually leaned forward. You built this specifically for us? He asked. We customized it, I answered carefully. The beauty of SupplyLink is its adaptability. We can configure it to any supply chain, any industry. By the end of the hour, Harlan was asking about implementation timelines and costs. As we wrapped up, he stood and extended his hand. "I think we have a deal," he said, "assuming your terms are reasonable." Dom and I managed to maintain our professional demeanor until we were alone in the elevator. Then we both let out whoops of excitement, high-fiving like kids. "We did it," Dom exclaimed. "Our first major client." "We're not there yet," I cautioned, though I couldn't stop smiling. "We still need to negotiate terms, draft contracts." "Details," Dom waved dismissively. "The point is they want us. Brew-Right wants Supply Link." As we exited the building, still riding high on our success, I nearly collided with someone entering. "Sorry, I began, then stopped short. Thorne stood before us, looking as surprised as I felt. He recovered quickly, his gaze taking in my professional attire, my laptop bag, and finally Dom beside me. "Zara," he acknowledged coolly. "And Dominic, was it? From Next Gen Marketing?" "It's Dom," my co-founder corrected. "From Supply Link now, actually." Thorne raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? And what brings you to Brew-Right's headquarters?" "Scouting for clients." There was something in his tone, a mixture of condescension and genuine curiosity, that made me stand taller. "Actually, we just closed our first major deal," I said, unable to keep the pride from my voice. "Brew-Right is implementing Supply Link across all 12 of their locations." For a split second, Thorne looked genuinely taken aback. Then his expression smoothed into polite indifference. "Well, congratulations," he said, though the words sounded forced. "I'm sure it will be a valuable learning experience, regardless of the outcome." "The outcome is going to be a successful partnership," Dom stated firmly. "And the first of many." Thorne's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We'll see. If you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with Harlan about their expansion financing." As he brushed past us, I couldn't resist asking, "Thorne, why are you really here? Brew-Right isn't exactly Blackwood Ventures' usual clientele." He paused, then turned back with a shrug that was too casual to be genuine. "Diversification. The craft beer industry is trending." The way he said it made it clear this was a recent development, perhaps even prompted by learning of our meeting today. Somehow, Thorne had found out we were pitching to Brew-Right and arranged his own meeting with them. Whether it was to undermine us or simply to keep tabs on me, I wasn't sure. Either way, it was classic Thorne, always needing to be one step ahead, always needed to have the upper hand. "Well, good luck with that," I said sweetly. "Though you might find Harlan in a particularly good mood today. He just solved his supply chain issues." Something dark flashed across Thorne's face before he nodded curtly and continued into the building. "Was that weird for you?" Dom asked as we walked to his car. "Running into him like that?" I considered the question. 6 months ago, seeing Thorne would have sent me into an emotional tailspin. Today, standing on the heels of our first major win, I felt something unexpected: pity. Thorne was still playing the same old games while I was building something new. "It wasn't weird," I replied honestly. "It was clarifying." Dom gave me a questioning look. "I used to think Thorne had all the power," I explained. "That his connections, his family name, his money gave him an edge I could never match. But today I realized something." "What's that?" I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. "We don't need to play his game. We're creating our own." As Dom drove us back to our office, where Ridley and Mila were waiting to hear how the meeting went, I made another silent promise to myself. This was just the beginning. Supply Link was going to succeed not to spite Thorne, but because we had built something valuable, something that solved real problems for real businesses. And maybe, just maybe, someday Thorne Blackwood would have to acknowledge that the woman he dismissed as nothing without him had become a force to be reckoned with all on her own. What I couldn't have known then was that day would come sooner than I expected, and in a way I never could have imagined. What I couldn't have known then was that day would come sooner than I expected, and in a way I never could have imagined. 3 years passed in a whirlwind of growth. The Brew-Right deal was just the beginning. Their success with our system led to referrals, and soon we had clients across multiple industries: restaurants, boutique retailers, small manufacturers. Anyone with a complex supply chain and not enough capital for enterprise-level solutions came to us. We moved out of our tiny office in Somerville to a proper space in Cambridge. Our team grew from 4 to 15, then 25. We raised a Series A round, then 18 months later, a Series B value supply link at $40 million. The girl who once worried about paying her share of rent at Veda's apartment now led a company that was revolutionizing how small businesses competed with corporate giants. Through it all, I occasionally heard snippets about Thorne. Boston's business community was too small to avoid news of the Blackwoods completely. I heard when Blackwood Ventures backed away from a major deal after due diligence revealed accounting irregularities. I heard whispers about Thorne's father being investigated for securities fraud. But these were background noises in my increasingly busy life, not something I actively followed. Until one Tuesday morning in October when Pax, our HR director, stopped by my office with an odd expression on her face. "You'll never guess who just applied for the business development position," she said, hovering in my doorway. I was half distracted reviewing quarterly projections. "Who?" "Thorne Blackwood." My head snapped up so fast I nearly gave myself whiplash. "What?" Pax nodded, clearly enjoying my reaction. "His application came in last night. Pretty impressive resume, if you ignore the fact that all his experience is at his family's company." She paused. "I'm guessing from your expression that there's a story here?" I took a steadying breath. "We have history." "Personal history?" Pax pressed, her curiosity piqued. "We were engaged," I admitted. "It ended not well." Pax's eyes widened. "Do you want me to reject the application?" I started to say yes, then stopped myself. Why was Thorne applying here of all places? Last I'd heard, Blackwood Ventures was still operating, albeit with a diminished portfolio. Something didn't add up. "No," I said finally. "Process it normally. But if he makes it to the interview stage, I want to know." For the next week, I found myself disturbingly preoccupied with Thorne's application. Had he known he was applying to my company? SupplyLink had been featured in several business publications, so it wasn't exactly a secret that I was the founder and CEO. But maybe he hadn't made the connection? The thought seemed absurd. Thorne was nothing if not thorough. Yet why else would he put himself in such a vulnerable position? The mystery was solved the following Tuesday when Pax messaged me. T. Blackwood made the interview shortlist. Scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m. Still want to know? I stared at the message for a long moment, then replied, "I'll conduct the interview personally." Pax appeared in my office doorway minutes later. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" "Probably not," I admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." The next 2 days, I was a bundle of nerves. Dom noticed during our morning strategy session. "What's going on with you?" he asked after I'd lost my train of thought for the third time. "You're a million miles away." I hesitated, then told him about Thorne's application. Dom whistled low. "Well, that's a twist I didn't see coming. What are you going to do?" "Interview him," I said with more confidence than I felt. "Find out what he's up to." Dom gave me a skeptical look. "And you're sure this isn't about, I don't know, some kind of revenge fantasy?" "Of course not," I said quickly. Too quickly, judging by Dom's raised eyebrow. Okay, maybe a tiny part of me wants to see his face when he realizes he's interviewing with me, but mostly, I'm genuinely curious. Why would Thorne Blackwood apply for a job at a startup? My startup? Only one way to find out, Dom shrugged. Want me to sit in? I considered it but shook my head. I need to do this myself. Thursday arrived, and I found myself changing outfits 3 times before settling on a sleek navy pantsuit that projected confidence without trying too hard. I styled my hair up, put on the pearl earrings Veda had given me for my birthday, and applied my boldest lipstick. It's just a job interview, I reminded my reflection. You've done dozens of these, but none with my ex-fiancé. At 1:55, I took a seat in our conference room, spreading Thorne's resume in front of me along with the standard interview questions our HR team had prepared. At precisely 2 o'clock, Pax messaged me, "Your 2 o'clock is here." Send him in, I replied, my heart racing despite my best efforts to remain calm. The door opened, and there he was. Thorne Blackwood, looking almost exactly as I remembered him, tailored suit, Perfectly styled hair, confident posture. Almost, but not quite. There was something different in his eyes, a tightness around his mouth that hadn't been there before. He froze when he saw me, genuine shock crossing his features before he recovered his composure. "Zara," he said, her name clearly not what he'd been expecting to say in this moment. "I didn't realize." I gestured to the chair across from me. "Mr. Blackwood, please have a seat." He hesitated, then moved forward with a stiffness that was so unlike his usual fluid confidence. As he sat down, I noticed other differences. His suit, while still expensive, wasn't new. His normally manicured hand showed signs of stress around the nails, and there was a weariness to him that I'd never associated with Thorn. "I take it you didn't know Supply Link was my company?" I asked, cutting straight to the chase. Thorn met my eyes. I knew. That caught me off guard. "Then why apply?" "Because I need a job," he said simply, "and you need someone with my connections and experience." I laughed, unable to help myself. "That's incredibly presumptuous of you." "Is it?" Thorn challenged, some of his old fire returning. "Look at my resume, Zara. Whatever personal history we have, my professional qualifications are solid. I've facilitated deals with half the major players in New England. I have relationships your company could leverage." "Had relationships," I corrected. "From what I hear, Blackwood Ventures isn't exactly in everyone's good graces these days." Something flashed across his face, pain, anger, resignation, before he nodded. "You've heard about my father, then?" "Bits and pieces," I admitted. "Securities fraud, wasn't it?" "Among other things," Thorne said quietly. "The company's assets are frozen pending investigation. My trust fund was legally tied to Blackwood Ventures, so that's inaccessible too. And it turns out when you spend your career trading on your family name, doors close pretty quickly when that name becomes toxic." I studied him, looking for signs that this was some elaborate manipulation. But all I saw was a man humbled by circumstances beyond his control. "Why here?" I asked again. "There must be firms that don't know about your personal connection to me." Thorne held my gaze. "Because you're succeeding where everyone said you would fail. Because you built something real while I was coasting on family legacy. And because I thought if anyone could understand wanting a second chance, it would be you." His honesty disarmed me. This wasn't the Thorne who'd mocked my ambitions and told me I'd come crawling back. This was someone new, or perhaps someone who'd always been there beneath the arrogance and entitlement. "If, and that's a big if, I were to consider your application," I said carefully, "what would stop you from leaving the moment Blackwood Ventures recovers?" "It's not going to recover," Thorne replied flatly. "My father's actions were too egregious, the damage too extensive. The Blackwood name and finance is finished." I let that sink in. The dynasty that had intimidated me, that had made me feel small and insignificant, had collapsed. And what about our history? I pressed. "How would you handle reporting to me, given everything that happened between us?" Thorne leaned forward. "Professionally. I'm not the same person who threw that ring across the room, Zara. The past 3 years have taught me some difficult lessons. I'm not asking for forgiveness or friendship, just an opportunity to prove myself on merit, not name." I sat back, considering him. The irony wasn't lost on me. Thorne Blackwood, who once told me I'd be nothing without him, now asking me for a chance to rebuild his life. "The position reports to Dom," I said finally. "He'd be your direct supervisor. And there would be a 6-month probation period, same as any new hire." Hope flickered in Thorne's eyes. "Does that mean you're considering it?" "It means I'll discuss it with my executive team," I replied, standing to signal the end of the interview. "We'll be in touch, Mr. Blackwood." He stood as well, extending his hand across the table. After a moment's hesitation, I shook it, feeling the strangeness of touching someone who had once been the center of my world and was now effectively a stranger. "Thank you for the interview," he said formally. "Regardless of the outcome, I'm proud of what you've built here." As he walked out, I remained standing, processing what had just happened. 3 years ago, I'd left Thorne's penthouse with nothing but a suitcase and a dream he'd belittled. Now he was walking out of my company, hoping I'd give him a chance that no one else would. Life really did come full circle. Life really did come full circle. I sat back down at the conference table, staring at the door Thorne had just walked through. The irony was almost too perfect. The man who told me I'd come crawling back had just done exactly that. I should have felt vindicated, triumphant even. Instead, I felt conflicted. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. Dom poked his head in. So, how was it seeing the great Thorne Blackwood humbled and asking for a job? I shrugged, not ready to articulate the complicated emotions swirling inside me. Surreal. Dom came in fully, taking the seat Thorne had just vacated. Are you actually considering hiring him? I don't know, I admitted. On paper, he's qualified. Overqualified, really. On paper, sure, Dom agreed. But can you trust him? After everything he did? That was the million-dollar question. Could I trust Thorne? More importantly, could I trust myself to maintain a professional relationship with someone who had once broken my heart? Let me see the interview notes, Dom said, reaching for the pad where I'd been jotting observations. I handed it over, watching as he scanned my barely legible handwriting. Connections in East Coast manufacturing sector, Dom read aloud. Experience with international supply chains. Knowledge of venture capital landscape. These are all things we need for the expansion. He looked up at me. You're seriously considering this? It wasn't a question. I'm considering what's best for the company, I clarified. Personal history aside, Thorne brings valuable experience and connections. And baggage, Dom added. Tons of it, shaped like designer luggage with monogrammed initials. I couldn't help but laugh at the image. Fair point. What did the rest of the team think? Dom asked. I conducted the interview alone. Dom's eyebrows shot up. Bold move. Or possibly insane. I haven't decided yet. I stood restless. I need to talk to Veda. An hour later, I was sitting on my sister's couch, a glass of wine in hand, recounting the surreal experience of interviewing my ex-fiancé for a job at my company. You're kidding me, Veda said, refilling her glass. Thorne, you'll be nothing without me. Blackwood applied to work for you? That's poetic justice on a level I didn't think actually existed in real life. It gets better, I said. He knew it was my company when he applied. Veda nearly choked on her wine. No way. Why would he do that? I repeated what Thorne had told me about his family's downfall and his limited options. Wow, Veda said when I finished. The mighty have fallen indeed. She studied my face. You're thinking of hiring him, aren't you? I'm considering it, I admitted. From a business perspective, it makes sense. And from an emotional perspective, Veda pressed. I sighed. That's more complicated. Because you still have feelings for him? She asked carefully. No, I said quickly. Too quickly judging by Veda's skeptical look. It's not that. I don't know. 3 years ago, he was this untouchable force in my life. Someone with so much power over my emotions, my self-worth. Seeing him today, humbled, asking for a chance is like the final piece of my own healing, proof that I've truly moved beyond that relationship. Veda nodded slowly. I get that. But hiring him seems like inviting that drama back into your life. Or proving once and for all that I'm completely over it, I countered. That I can work with him as just another employee because he no longer has any emotional power over me. And if that's not true, Veda asked gently, if seeing him every day stirs up old feelings, good or bad? I didn't have an answer for that. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting with our executive team, Dom, Ridley, now our CTO, Pax from HR, and Nisha, our newly hired CFO. I'm sure you're wondering why I called this meeting, I began, looking around the table. Does it have something to do with you personally interviewing a job candidate yesterday? Pax asked, always direct. A candidate named Thorne Blackwood? I nodded. Some of you know this, but Thorne and I were engaged 3 years ago before I started SupplyLink. Nisha, who joined the company only 6 months earlier, looked surprised. The Thorne Blackwood? Of Blackwood Ventures? The same, I confirmed. Our relationship ended poorly. He wasn't supportive of my entrepreneurial ambitions. That's an understatement, Dom muttered. The point is, I continued, he's applied for the business development position and on paper he's qualified. I wanted to discuss with all of you whether bringing him on would be a good move for the company, given the personal history. Ridley spoke first. What happened with Blackwood Ventures? I've heard rumors, but I gave them the condensed version of what Thorne had told me. So he's desperate, Nisha observed. That could work in our favor. Hungry employees tend to be motivated. Employees? Or it could be a disaster waiting to happen, Dom countered. What if he's just using us until something better comes along? The 6-month probation period would mitigate some of that risk, Pax pointed out, and we could include a non-compete clause in his contract. The discussion continued, with valid points raised on both sides. In the end, though, the decision was mine to make. Thank you all for your input, I said. I appreciate your honesty and your concerns. I'm going to think about this overnight and let you know my decision tomorrow. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the interview with Thorne in my mind, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. But all I could see was the genuine humility in his eyes when he admitted he needed this job, needed me to give him a chance. By morning, I had my answer. I called Pax first thing. Extend an offer to Thorne Blackwood for the business development position. Standard package, 6-month probation, and add a non-compete clause as discussed. You sure about this, boss? Pax asked. No, I admitted, but I think it's the right move for the company. The next week was a blur of preparations. I had HR set up Thorne's workstation as far from my office as reasonably possible. I briefed Dom extensively, since he would be Thorne's direct supervisor. And I drafted a company-wide email announcing the new hire, carefully worded to focus on Thorne's qualifications rather than his family name. The day Thorne started, I deliberately scheduled myself for off-site meetings. I wasn't avoiding him, I told myself. I was just giving him space to settle in without the awkwardness of my presence. But I couldn't avoid him forever. 3 days later, I was working late when a knock came at my office door. Come in, I called, not looking up from my laptop. Do you have a minute? I recognized Thorne's voice immediately and forced myself to look up casually. Thorne. Settling in okay? He nodded, hovering in the doorway. May I? He asked, gesturing to the chair opposite my desk. I nodded, closing my laptop to give him my full attention. Thorne sat down, looking more at ease and business casual than I would have expected. The designer suits had always seemed like a second skin to him. I wanted to thank you, he said without preamble, for taking a chance on me. I know it couldn't have been an easy decision. It wasn't, I admitted. The executive team had concerns. I'm sure they did. He smiled faintly. Dom makes no secret of his distrust. He's a good friend to you. The best, I agreed. He was there when I needed support the most. Thorne nodded, accepting the implied criticism without defense. I'm not here to rehash the past, Zara, or to apologize again. Actions matter more than words, and I intend to prove my worth to this company with actions. I appreciate that, I said, surprised by his maturity. The old Thorne would have launched into a grand speech about his intentions, expecting praise for the mere thought of doing the right thing. He stood to leave, then hesitated. For what it's worth, you've built something remarkable here. SupplyLink is exactly what you said it would be, a game changer for small businesses. You should be proud. I am, I replied simply. After he left, I sat for a long time, reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this point. 3 years ago, I'd walked out of Thorne's penthouse feeling like my world was ending. Now I sat in my own office, running my own company with Thorne as just another employee. The symmetry was undeniable, but it didn't feel like revenge anymore. It felt like growth. In the weeks that followed, Thorne proved himself to be a valuable asset to the team. His industry knowledge was extensive, his work ethic impressive. He showed none of the entitlement I'd expected, instead approaching each task with humility and thoroughness. 1 month into his probation, Dom grudgingly admitted that Thorne was performing above expectations. He closed the Westridge deal, Dom reported during our weekly check-in, a client we've been courting for months. 1 phone call from Thorne, and they signed. His connections are paying off then, I noted. It's more than that, Dom admitted. He's good at what he does. Really good. And he seems different. Less arrogant, I supplied. I was going to say douchey, but arrogant works too. I laughed. People can change, I guess. Dom gave me a pointed look. Speaking of change, you seem more relaxed about having him around. No more scheduling conveniently timed meetings when he's in the office. I wasn't, I began, then sighed at Dom's knowing expression. Fine, maybe I was avoiding him a bit, but it's not an issue anymore. We're adults. We can work together professionally. Good, Dom said. Because he's presenting at the all-hands meeting tomorrow, and it would be weird if the CEO suddenly had a dental emergency. The next day, I sat in the front row as Thorne presented his strategy for expanding SupplyLink's client base into new industries. He was poised, articulate, and thoroughly prepared, all qualities I'd once admired in him. When he opened the floor for questions, I found myself raising my hand. Miss Kingsley, he acknowledged, the formality striking a perfect professional note. Have you considered partnering with industry associations rather than approaching individual businesses? I asked. It might give us broader reach. Thorne's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. The excellent point. In fact, I've already had preliminary conversations with the New England Manufacturers Association. They're interested in offering SupplyLink as a member benefit at a group rate. I nodded, impressed despite myself. Good initiative. Let's discuss details after the meeting. As the team dispersed, Thorne approached my chair. Do you have time now for that discussion? Actually, I do, I said, leading the way to my office. For the next hour, we talked strategy not as ex-fiancés with baggage, but as two professionals with a shared goal. It was surprisingly easy, comfortable even. As Thorne was leaving, he paused at the door. This is nice, he said quietly. Working together instead of against each other. Yes, I agreed. It is. And in that moment, I realized something important. Success wasn't about proving Thorne wrong. It was about proving myself right. The woman who left that penthouse with nothing but a broken heart and a business plan had built something valuable, something that helped real businesses solve real problems. And now, ironically, that included helping the man who'd once dismissed her dreams. Life had indeed come full circle, but not in the way I'd imagined. This wasn't an ending where I lorded my success over Thorne. It was something more meaningful, a new beginning where we'd both learned from our mistakes and grown into better versions of ourselves. And that more than any revenge fantasy was the true victory.